This is the intermediate shaft. This is going to attach to our steering wheel column, and then this drops down to our rack and pinion assembly. And we have the U-joints removed, but as this twists, you can see this rack is moving back and forth. And I'll flip this here so you can see the teeth here. So you can see these right here. This allows for movement back and forth, and they have the rack assembly, and then there's a pinion gear that's spinning this back and forth. We had an inner tie rod attached to this. Some of them are bolted on this rack and pinion. We cut off here to get the rack out. This right here is an inner tie rod that would be bolted on to this. So this represents this here, and this inner tie rod is a flexible little ball socket here, and it's protected with a bellow boot. So this bellow boot will go over here and keep this protected inside of here. Okay, so this is inside of the boot and keeps contaminants out, and this is bolted to the rack, and this boot goes over, and then it attaches here. You can see on this inner tie rod, it's basically a shaft. We have a jam nut here. When we do our alignment, we lock this jam nut against a outer tie rod. This is an outer tie rod that attaches to the steering knuckle. So this bolts onto the steering knuckle, and you can see this just threads, this inner tie rod threads to the outer tie rod. And if we ever remove this outer tie rod and we're changing it, you want to count how many turns it took to remove it, and then we thread it in that same revolutions as you're counting 3, 4, 5, 6, because we want to have that similar to the same spacing after we've changed it to do our alignment. And then after we get it close to where it needs to be, we tighten the jam nut up against this. And this keeps it locked on this outer and inner tie rod, the inner and outer together to this rack and pinion. So a lot of the times these tie rods will wear out. They become loose, similar to our ball joint sockets that we showed you. And sometimes these little sockets will wear out too. So we may need to change the inner tie rod and the outer tie rod occasionally to do an alignment. It is a steering knuckle, and the steering knuckle is attached to our outer tie rod, and it is bolted onto the outer tie rod is bolted onto this inner tie rod. This is a jam nut when we do an alignment. This is a bellow boot, and you can probably get on the other side here. This bellow boot is now connected to a rack and pinion assembly. And then we have another bellow boot, inner tie rod, outer tie rod with jam nut, and that goes to our steering knuckle again on the other wheel. So this is a rack and pinion steering assembly. And it goes from wheel to wheel, steering knuckle to steering knuckle. To do a tie rod test, I'm going to grab the wheel in the 3 and 9 o'clock position. So I'm going like this, back and forth. So I'm going to go back and forth like this. Where's the movement coming from? So with the light, let's have you come over here. Right here. Is it coming from this tie rod or the boot. So we're going to move this back and forth. Where is the movement coming from?
The tie rod.
The inner tie rod, the outer tie rod. And I'm simply moving the wheel back and forth, checking for movement. And I do this on both sides. So I'm going to do this on this side, and I'm checking to see where is that movement. Moving the wheel back and forth, because that's my steering. I'm checking the inner and outer tie rod, seeing where the movement is. That's how you check tie rods. Okay? There.
On that or like?
Okay, so now the wheel. See how it moves back and forth. Check the outer. That one's moving all together. So just the inner one is bad, I should say. There you go. Is it a second period or something? Okay. Okay. Go ahead and move the tire. Keep going.